Why did Prince Charles feel forced to marry Diana? How was Diana persuaded to ignore Charles's infidelity before their marriage? And why was Diana branded unstable by her husband's supporters? Hi, I'm Joy, and you're watching OSSA, a not-so-perfect start. When Diana was born in July 1961, her family was familiar with grief. The year before, her brother John passed away, and the trauma is reported to have led to Diana's parents' divorce 6 years later. When the princess later recalled her parents' split, she said, "The divorce helped me to relate to anyone else who's upset in their family life. I understand it." Shortly after the split, when Diana was 13, her grandfather passed away, and she officially inherited the title of Lady. Despite this, the family tried to give the future princess and her siblings a normal life. Diana attended a girls' boarding school along with her sisters, and despite showing great talent as a sportswoman and dancer, was never interested in academics. After failing her O-levels twice, Lady Di officially dropped out of high school at 16 without a diploma. However, things began to look up when she met a literal prince. A whirlwind romance. When Diana first met Prince Charles in 1977, he was dating her sister Sarah. And though Sarah later admitted that she was underwhelmed by the prince, she decided to play Cupid and introduce her beau to Diana. Despite a 12-year age difference between Charles and Di, there were sparks. She later recalled that, for a 16-year-old, for someone like that to show any attention was just so amazing. Why would anyone like that be interested in me? And while she was undeniably starstruck, Charles was intrigued. He told The Telegraph that, "I remember thinking what a very jolly and amusing and attractive 16-year-old she was. I mean, great fun and bouncy and full of life and everything." And a few months later, he invited Diana to his 30th birthday party, and everything changed. It was 1980 and Diana was 19 years old. Charles was forced to break up with his girlfriend Camilla after she got married, and Diana expressed concern that the prince must be feeling lonely. Unbelievably, he confirmed her suspicions by hitting on her.
He chatted me up. Like a bad rash. He was all over me. I thought, this is not what people do. And he was all over me for the rest of the evening, followed me around, everything, puppy.
And though she considered his behavior uncool, she had no basis for comparison as she'd never had a boyfriend. So, ignoring her own concerns, she agreed to go out with Charles. Sadly, when the media got word of the relationship, they were thrust into the limelight. Of course, this wasn't an ideal situation for the future King of England to be in. To end the media frenzy, Charles's father, Prince Philip, urged him to either call it quits with Diana or to settle down and marry her. Strangely, Charles misunderstood this fatherly advice as a trap. He told a friend that, to have withdrawn, as you can imagine, would have been cataclysmic. Hence, I was permanently between the devil and the deep blue sea. And so, despite only seeing each other a shocking 13 times, Prince Charles proposed to Lady Diana. Warning bells and wedding bells. During the couple's first official interview after their engagement, they were asked if they were in love, and Charles's response worried Diana. The princess explained, "I thought, what a thick question. So I said, yes, of course we are." So she was traumatized by her fiancé's own response to the question.
Whatever in love means.
It was the first of many moments that made Diana unhappy. In July 1981, just before saying their I do's, Di found a bracelet that Charles secretly planned to give to his ex. However, when Di worried that Charles was still involved with Camilla, her sisters insisted it was too late to back out of the wedding, and she went through with it. And it all went downhill from there, pretty quickly. After they exchanged vows, there was no kiss, because Charles apparently forgot. Sure, he made up for this by kissing his new bride on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, but that definitely wasn't a good omen. In her biography, the princess admitted that despite Charles's hesitancy, "I remember being so in love with my husband that I couldn't take my eyes off him. I just absolutely thought I was the luckiest girl in the world." Well, was I wrong on that assumption? She may have had eyes only for him, but Charles was splitting his attention between his new wife and his former flame, Camilla. Unfortunately, this would not be the last time that Camilla interfered in Diana's marriage. Starting a family and starting to hurt. A few months after their honeymoon, the couple announced the news of Diana's pregnancy. Instead of this being the happiest time of her life, Diana felt isolated and detached from Charles and was sure he didn't love her. She was so convinced of this that at the end of her first trimester, she intentionally hurt herself and her baby. She admitted that, "I threw myself downstairs, trying to get my husband's attention for him to listen to me. I had told Charles I felt so desperate, and I was crying my eyes out. He said I was crying wolf." And her suspicions were realized when Di admitted she had to schedule the birth of her first child, Prince William, around Charles's schedule, although not for the reasons you may imagine. The princess clarified, "When we had William, we had to find a date in the diary that suited Charles and his polo." But she didn't just have to struggle with an absentee husband. After William's birth, Diana suffered from severe postpartum depression. 2 years later, when Diana gave birth to Prince Harry, she realized that she and Charles were more incompatible than she had ever imagined. Not only was he disappointed that the baby was a boy, as he had his heart set on a daughter, but he made a flippant joke about his red hair. The exchange broke something inside her. Not only were her feelings towards her husband changing for the worse, but she suspected that he had started another affair with Camilla. Is there room for one more? And she was right. In a 1994 biography, Charles admitted that he'd begun seeing Camilla in 1986. However, Diana believed that he'd never stopped seeing Camilla throughout their marriage.
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
At her lowest point, Diana turned to an unlikely source for advice. She asked her mother-in-law what to do about Charles. Like her marriage, the Queen's response was disappointing.
I said, what to do, what I do, I'm coming to you, what do I do? And she said, I don't know what you should do. Charles is hopeless.
Fed up with her husband's behavior and the fact that the royal family turned a blind eye, she internalized her pain and became bulimic. Despite her eating disorder being labeled one of the reasons for their failed marriage, the princess admitted it was actually the result of her suffering.
I chose to hurt myself instead of hurting all of you.
And it got worse. Di felt isolated and alone, and no matter how hard she tried to fix it, including confronting Charles and Camilla and begging them to stop, her husband continued with his affair. Desperate and depressed, she eventually took a leaf out of Charles's book and began an affair of her own. Diana fell head over heels in love with her bodyguard, Barry Manakee, in 1985. However, her happiness was short-lived because when the affair was discovered, Manakee was fired. 3 weeks later, he died in a car accident, but Di suspected he'd been killed.
And it was all found out, and he was chucked out, and then he was killed. And that was the biggest blow of my life, I must say.
Despite the disastrous result of her first affair, Di followed her heart into other relationships. In 1986, she started seeing a cavalry officer called James Hewitt. The two were together for 5 years before the media found out and Hewitt was deployed to the Gulf War. Because of the timing, and because Di admitted that she loved Hewitt, the relationship got a lot of attention, and it was even suggested that Hewitt was Prince Harry's real father. However, Hewitt has denied these rumors, explaining that he only started seeing Diana after Harry was born. Amid all the scrutiny and gossip, Diana reached breaking point. Breaking the silence. With a cheating husband, clouds of paparazzi, and an eating disorder, Diana quickly became labeled unstable. And though the royal family knew what was going on, they showed no signs of wanting to help Diana, who suffered in silence. In an interview, she mused, "Maybe I was the first person to be in his family who had depression or who was openly tearful." In an attempt to make the most of a bad situation, Diana turned to philanthropy and charity. Why?
I got nothing else to do.
Well, that's how it started. Soon enough, Diana realized that she could heal her own wounds through helping others. It was the embodiment of something she'd said for years. She was led by her heart and not her brain. This alienated her from the royal family, but it's also what made her the people's princess. In 1992, they could no longer keep up the pretense of a happy marriage. Diana's latest affair with James Gilby became public knowledge, and at the same time, a lurid phone call between Charles and Camilla was not only recorded, but printed in the newspapers. The same year, Diana's recorded sessions with a journalist were published as a biography, and the public finally became aware of the marriage that the princess described as real torture. So, it came as no surprise when the couple announced their separation at the end of 1992. The start of the end. Once officially separated, Diana announced her plans to retire from public life. Charles continued to see Camilla, but tried to do some damage control through a documentary in which he explained that he hadn't been sure about the marriage in the first place, as he'd barely known Diana. He elaborated, "I desperately wanted to get out of the wedding, when during the engagement I discovered just how awful the prospects were." But it still took 4 years for Diana and Charles to divorce, because the Queen wouldn't permit it. By August 1996, the terms of the divorce had been agreed to, and it was an ugly business. Charles insisted that the princess give up her title of Her Royal Highness, along with any claim to the throne. This was seen as a petty move on Charles's part, because without the title, decorum dictated that Diana curtsy to those members of the family who were called Your Royal Highness, including her own sons. And to add insult to injury, there were still those who insisted that Charles's behavior and Diana's subsequent snubbing and depression were the princess's own fault. In a letter from her former father-in-law, Diana learnt that Prince Philip felt that Charles was silly to risk everything with Camilla. "We never dreamed he might feel like leaving you for her." But he followed this with an accusation, asking, "Can you honestly look into your heart and say that Charles's relationship with Camilla had nothing to do with your behavior towards him in your marriage?" After their divorce, Diana was candid about her marriage, her affairs, her eating disorder, and her deep unhappiness. Not only did this cause a rift in the family, with loyalties divided between the prince and princess, but it raised several questions about what was really going on in Buckingham Palace. A year after her divorce, in August 1997, Diana and her newest beau, Dodi Fayed, were on their way home from dinner when everything changed. Their driver was drunk, and while speeding away from paparazzi, crashed the car. Together with Dodi, the driver was killed instantly, while Diana and her bodyguard were taken to hospital. Tragically, Diana succumbed to her injuries, and her long battle for happiness was finally over. And while there are those who accuse the royal family of having a hand in the princess's death, much like the motor accident that killed her first lover in 1985, no amount of speculation would ever bring back the princess, and the world is poorer for it. Were you as surprised to learn about Diana's struggles as we were? Let us know in the comments below, and until next time, stay awesome.